When the HOA president poisoned my mom's water to force us out, they thought we'd just roll over and leave. Instead, I bought the company that controlled their water supply and made them beg for a second chance. This isn't just a story of revenge. It's a story of how a whole community woke up, fought back, and found hope where there was only fear. The late afternoon sun painted long shadows over Mom's rose garden as I finished watering the last bush. I always loved these quiet moments, the rich scent of soil, the buzz of bees, and the peacefulness that wrapped around our little corner of Pinecrest Gardens. It was a fragile piece, though, and it shattered the instant Karen Thompson's glossy black SUV crunched into our gravel driveway. My gut tightened instinctively. Trouble always rode in with Karen. She barely lowered her window, like the dust might taint her pristine interior. "Alex," she called, flashing her familiar plastic smile. "Those garden gnomes simply must go. Section 8, paragraph 12. You know the rules." I set down the watering can, wiping my hands on my jeans. "They've been here for 7 years, Karen," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Dad placed everyone himself." Her smile tightened. "Rules are rules. Remove them by Friday or face a fine. $200 per gnome." She didn't even wait for a response, speeding off in a shower of gravel. I counted the gnomes, heart sinking. 8 cheerful little statues stood nestled among the roses, each one a piece of Dad's memory. If I left them, we'd owe $1,600, money we didn't have with Mom's medical bills stacking higher by the week. Mom appeared at the door, frail but smiling, unaware of the latest attack. Was that Karen again? "Just HOA nonsense," I lied, not wanting to burden her anymore. That night, with hands heavier than the boxes themselves, I wrapped each gnome carefully and stored them away in the garage, like packing up pieces of our happiness. Friday came, and true to form, I saw Karen patrolling the neighborhood with her clipboard, smugly noting our now barren flower beds. I thought maybe, just maybe, it was over, but I underestimated Karen's hunger for control. By Monday, another notice was jammed in our mailbox. Apparently, our mailbox paint was now non-compliant, wrong shade of blue. They demanded we repaint it midnight azure, a shade found in a ridiculous 62-page approved colors booklet. I bit my tongue as I repainted the mailbox, reminding myself it wasn't worth a fight. But Karen wasn't done. The bird feeder, against regulations, the wind chimes, too noisy. Even the height of our hedges became a problem. Each visit left Mom looking weaker, the stress leaching away what little energy she had. Her once bright eyes dulled, her steps faltered more with each passing day. And as her spirit dimmed, something darker stirred in me, a slow, burning rage that I tried desperately to keep buried. The final straw came one evening when, taking out the trash, I caught a glimpse of Doug Thompson, Karen's husband, loitering near our water meter at the edge of the property. When he spotted me, he pretended to scroll his phone and hurried off. "Everything okay?" I called after him. "Just walking the dog," he mumbled, except the Thompsons didn't own a dog. The next morning, Mom was too weak to hold her coffee mug. Her hand shook violently, and her face looked pale and drawn. Alarmed, I rushed her to the hospital. The doctors ran test after test but found no clear diagnosis. "Could be viral," they said, "or possibly something environmental." As I drove her home under the heavy weight of unanswered questions, I passed Karen's house. Inside, I caught a fleeting glimpse of her and Doug through the kitchen window, raising wine glasses in a silent toast. And somewhere deep inside me, a switch flipped. This wasn't just petty harassment anymore. Something far more sinister was happening, and I was going to find out what. The hospital parking lot felt colder than usual as I helped Mom from the car, her hand trembling in mine. I kept thinking about Doug lingering by the water meter, the uneasy smirk he gave when he thought I wasn't looking. Something was wrong, worse than anything Karen had ever cooked up before. While Mom rested inside, I circled our property, flashlight in hand. At the meter, I knelt down and saw it, faint droplets of blue liquid staining the rocks. My heart hammered. I scooped up a sample in a plastic bag, every instinct screaming that we were under attack. The next day was a blur. Mom struggled to stay awake, barely able to eat, her skin taking on a yellowish hue. I called Dr. Patel, desperate, and he agreed to squeeze us in immediately. As I packed the car, a new violation notice flapped in the breeze, taped to our door. Unauthorized landscaping. $250 fine. They fined us because I hadn't mowed the lawn while caring for Mom in the hospital. Anger surged through me, sharper than anything I'd felt before. At the clinic, Dr. Patel's face darkened as he reviewed Mom's blood work. Elevated liver enzymes, kidney stress, no obvious cause. "We're running toxicology," he said grimly. "It could be something environmental." Environmental. My mind flashed back to Doug at the meter and the strange blue liquid. That night, I installed a small security camera high in the oak tree overlooking the water meter. Cheap, obvious. I wanted them to see it. It didn't take long. 2 nights later, at just past midnight, the motion alert pinged on my phone. I sat bolt upright, heart racing, and pulled up the feed. There they were. Doug crouched by the meter, pouring something from a small bottle into the line. Karen stood guard by the curb, engine running. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped the phone. I sprinted outside, but by the time I got there, they were gone. Only the faint rumble of the SUV disappearing down the street. Breathless, furious, I saved the footage and grabbed another water sample straight from our kitchen tap. First thing the next morning, I rushed the sample and footage to a local independent lab. The technician, a guy named Dave, raised an eyebrow when he heard my story but nodded seriously. "I'll run an expedited panel," he promised, "but full results will take a couple days." As I waited, I visited Mom at the hospital. Her condition had worsened. Dialysis had been mentioned. I sat by her bedside, fighting back rage and guilt. I had promised to protect her, and now here she was, frail and barely able to squeeze my hand. When my phone finally buzzed, Dave's voice was grim. "You were right," he said. "We found ethylene glycol, antifreeze, in your water supply. Low levels, but consistent and recent." It felt like the ground shifted beneath my feet. Poison. They were poisoning my mother. Slowly, carefully, enough to destroy her health but not kill her outright. Enough to make it look like natural causes. I drove straight to the police station, the water test and security footage clutched in my shaking hands. Officer Martinez listened patiently but frowned. "The footage is suggestive," she said cautiously, "but it doesn't clearly show what substance was poured. Without direct evidence, it's circumstantial." "Is a dying woman not enough?" I choked out. "We'll open an investigation," she promised. But the way she said it, the careful tone, the distant look, told me not to hold my breath. When I got home, another HOA notice was waiting. Unauthorized surveillance equipment, remove within 48 hours. They knew. They knew I had seen them. That night, as I sat in the dark, staring out over Mom's empty rose garden, a bitter realization settled in. If the law wouldn't protect us, I would have to find another way. And I would make sure Karen Thompson and her rotten kingdom crumbled into dust. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd aged 10 years overnight. Mom's hospital room smelled like antiseptic and quiet defeat. Her skin was grayish, and she barely opened her eyes when I squeezed her hand. Dr. Patel confirmed my worst fear. Her kidneys are worsening. Dialysis is inevitable now unless we can stop the exposure. I left the hospital with a single thought burning in my brain. They are killing her. Back home, the house felt too quiet. I paced the kitchen floor, boots thudding against the tiles. I couldn't just wait for the police to maybe someday do something. Karen had the board, the fines, the system, every tool she needed to crush us. And now she was going after Mom's life. But she had made one critical mistake. She had underestimated me. I pulled out my laptop and began digging, searching every record, every file I could find on Pinecrest Gardens infrastructure. It wasn't the city providing water here. It was a private company, Clearwater LLC. an old, nearly bankrupt entity running out of steam. Then a crazy idea hit me like a lightning bolt. What if I bought them? What if I controlled the water Karen and her little empire depended on? I called Jamie, an old friend from college who had become an environmental lawyer. She listened carefully as I laid out my plan. "Alex," she said, voice low and serious, "this is nuclear. You're talking about buying the very thing that keeps their homes livable." "I'm done playing by their rules," I said. "They poisoned my mother. They want war. I'll give it to them." Jamie sighed. "It's risky. Buying into a bankrupt company is messy, and you'll need every dollar you've got." "I'll sell the truck if I have to," I said without hesitation. "Whatever it takes." Within 2 days, Jamie had made contact with the bankruptcy court managing Clearwater's dissolution, and the number they gave us to buy the rights wasn't impossible. Painful? Yes. Every penny of my savings, my 401k, a home equity loan, and a miracle from the bank manager who remembered my dad and took pity on me. But impossible? No. While the paperwork crawled through the courts, Karen kept her assault up. Violation notices flooded in. Excessive weed growth. Non-standard mailbox paint. Improper fence height. Each fine more absurd than the last. One evening, as I repainted the mailbox in the official HOA-approved Midnight Azure, Karen pulled up again, smug smile pasted on her face. "You know," she said, stepping out of her SUV, "maybe it's time you thought about selling. Assisted living is so much easier for families like yours." Families like yours. I clenched the paintbrush so hard it snapped in half. She thought she had already won. She had no idea what was coming. Later that night, I got the email I'd been praying for. Clearwater, LLC, ownership transfer approved. I sat in the kitchen staring at the screen, the finality of it sinking in. I owned the water. I owned their lifeline. Tomorrow, the first moves of my real plan would begin. And for the first time in weeks, a small smile crept onto my face. Karen and her friends were about to learn what happens when you push a man too far, especially when that man controls every faucet in town. The sun hadn't even cleared the treetops when I drafted the letter. It was short, brutal, and delivered by certified mail to every single home in Pinecrest Gardens, especially Karen's. Notice: effective immediately, water rates for all Pinecrest Gardens properties will increase by 400% due to emergency maintenance fees. Payment required within 15 days to avoid service interruption. Signed, Alex Morrison, owner, Clearwater, LLC. I slipped the last envelope into the outgoing mail and sat back, waiting. I didn't have to wait long. By noon, my phone lit up with furious calls. I ignored every one of them. At 3 p.m. sharp, Malcolm Reed, the HOA treasurer, left a furious voicemail threatening legal action. By 5 p.m., Karen herself was pounding on my front door. I let her knock until she got tired. Only then did I swing the door open slowly, leaning casually against the frame. "You!" she shrieked, waving my letter in my face. "You can't do this." "Actually," I said calmly, "I can. I read the original utility contracts. You should have too." Her face went beet red. "We'll sue. The board will destroy you." I shrugged. "You're welcome to try, but good luck explaining to a judge how the HOA poisoned a senior citizen while trying to seize her property." For the first time, Karen faltered. Her eyes darted toward my security cameras, no doubt remembering the footage I had captured. She tried a different tactic. "We're willing to negotiate," she said, forcing a tight smile. "Maybe we can forgive the fines on your property, even restore your HOA privileges." I laughed, a short, humorless sound. "You don't get it, Karen. I don't want to be part of your little kingdom. I want to burn it to the ground." She spun on her heel and stormed back to her SUV. That night, as the news of the rate hikes spread like wildfire, I stood at the edge of my property, watching the neighborhood windows glow with frantic activity. HOA emergency meetings were being called. Angry residents filled the community center, shouting at Malcolm, at Doug, at each other. And through it all, Karen sat stiffly at the front, sweating under the fluorescent lights, realizing for the first time she wasn't in control anymore. The next morning, the official HOA Facebook page exploded with rage. Why are our bills quadrupled? Who's running this HOA into the ground? We demand answers. By the second day, people were showing up at Karen's door, furious, holding their water bills in trembling hands. By the third, for sale signs started popping up on front lawns like mushrooms after a storm. I didn't revel in it. I didn't throw a party. I just waited. Because I knew something deeper was coming. Desperation. And desperation makes people sloppy. Sure enough, it wasn't long before Doug Thompson, Karen's bulldog of a husband, was spotted lurking near my property line again, pretending to walk his imaginary dog. Only this time, my new hidden cameras caught everything. The footage showed Doug tampering with a neighbor's irrigation system, hoping to frame me for more water violations. The fool. I sent the footage straight to Detective Rivera, along with the latest hospital updates on Mom's deteriorating condition. This time, the police took it seriously. Subpoenas were issued. Doug and Karen's phones were seized. Investigators dug into HOA financial records, and what they found made the original water poisoning scandal look small. It wasn't just me. It wasn't even just Mom. It was dozens of families. Years of fake violations, rigged elections, and embezzled dues. The facade was crumbling fast, and Karen was trapped inside it. And me? I wasn't just fighting back anymore. I was winning. It started with a single knock at my door. Elaine Rodriguez, the sweet retired teacher from across the street, stood there, holding a casserole dish with trembling hands. "We're with you," she said, her voice shaking but determined. "We know what they've been doing, and we're tired of being afraid." Behind her, I saw more neighbors gathering, families I'd barely spoken to before, elderly couples, young parents pushing strollers, all stepping onto my lawn one by one. The people Karen had ruled over for years like a queen now looked at me with hope flickering in their tired eyes. Elaine set the casserole down. "You fought back when no one else dared. Now it's our turn." And that night my living room overflowed with neighbors. Rick Thompson, the county clerk, and my oldest friend spread property records across my coffee table. Ted Jenkins, retired Navy, stood watch at the window. Even old Mr. Henley, who hadn't spoken to anyone since his stroke, managed to drag himself in, fists clenched. We went over the evidence together. Illegal water tampering, forged violation notices, HOA dues siphoned into Karen and Doug's personal accounts. Anger simmered in this room until it boiled over. "Enough is enough," Ted growled, slamming his palm on the table. "They've poisoned kids, pets, seniors. For what? A few extra bucks and power trips?" Elaine nodded, eyes shining with fury. "We let them push us around for too long, no more." We organized fast. Elaine used her old PTA skills to rally homeowners. Rick quietly leaked county documents to the press. Ted and I canvassed the neighborhood, explaining the real story to anyone willing to listen. And there were plenty. Mothers clutching sick toddlers. Widowers whose gardens had been destroyed by arbitrary fines. Veterans whose flags were taken down for being non-regulation. Everywhere we went, we saw it. Fear turning into righteous fury. By the weekend, every lamppost in Pinecrest Gardens was plastered with flyers. Emergency town meeting, demand accountability. Take back our community. Karen tried to fight back. She sent out glossy newsletters packed with lies. Misinformation campaign. Isolated incident. Don't listen to disgruntled troublemakers. But no one believed her anymore. At the emergency meeting, the community center was packed wall to wall, standing room only. Karen walked in with Doug at her side, sunglasses covering her eyes like some washed-up celebrity dodging scandal. But there were no bodyguards here. No cameras to control, only neighbors, victims, survivors. Rick stepped up to the podium first, clearing his throat. "We, the homeowners of Pinecrest Gardens, hereby call for the immediate resignation of Karen Thompson and the entire HOA board. Effective tonight. The applause shook the walls. Karen tried to speak, but every time she opened her mouth, the crowd roared louder. Resign! 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 Doug shoved forward, face red with rage. You can't do this! This meeting's illegal! Elaine calmly held up the HOA bylaws. Section 14, paragraph 7. Special emergency meetings may be called by a majority of residents with 48-hour notice. We have over 80% attendance tonight. Doug deflated like a balloon, muttering curses under his breath. And Karen, she turned and ran, literally, out the back door into the parking lot, disappearing into the night. No one stopped her, because Karen Thompson no longer held any power here. We did. That night, the HOA board dissolved. A temporary leadership committee was formed, with real community members this time, not self-appointed tyrants. As I stood outside under the stars, exhausted but buzzing with adrenaline, Ted clapped me on the back. You didn't just fight for your mom, he said, voice thick with emotion. You fought for all of us. I looked out at the rows of modest homes, battered but still standing, at the neighbors hugging each other, shaking hands, laughing through tears. And for the first time in months, I finally believed it. We had taken back our homes, our dignity, our community, and we weren't giving it up ever again. The Monday after Karen's collapse of power, the floodgates truly opened. It started when the local news van rolled down Main Street. A young reporter named Jess Carter had caught wind of the story. She wasn't here for some puff piece about HOA disputes. She was here for blood. That morning, live on camera, Jess interviewed Elaine, Rick, and even Mrs. Gonzalez from 3 doors down. Each of them spoke, not just about my mom's poisoning, but about years of petty tyranny, hidden fines, sudden property seizures, and bullying disguised as community standards. Jess didn't mince words. Residents allege HOA President Karen Thompson poisoned neighbors, falsified violations, and misused community funds, evidence now under criminal investigation. And within hours, the story went national. News outlets started calling Pinecrest Gardens the HOA from hell. Karen's face, once plastered proudly on glossy HOA newsletters, now flashed across every TV screen next to words like corruption, poisoning allegations, and embezzlement investigation. The police weren't far behind. Search warrants were executed on Karen's home, Doug's office, and the HOA's tiny storefront building. Boxes of documents, computers, and tablets were carried out under the flashing blue lights. At first, Karen tried to deny everything. "It's a witch hunt," she shrieked to reporters. "I'm the real victim here." But evidence doesn't lie. Detectives found records of secret HOA bank accounts funneling residents' dues into Karen's personal travel fund, exotic vacations, designer handbags, even a private spa membership. Even worse, chemical tests confirmed that the same antifreeze found in Mom's bloodstream was traced back to containers hidden in Karen and Doug's garage. The dam had broken wide open, and Karen was drowning. The county district attorney announced criminal charges, multiple counts of attempted poisoning, conspiracy to commit fraud, financial crimes, elder abuse. Karen and Doug were both arrested, handcuffed on their perfect manicured lawn while neighbors gathered silently to watch. Doug tried to hide his face behind his jacket. Karen, ever the actress, sobbed loudly for the cameras, pleading innocence even as she was shoved into the back of a patrol car. I stood by the mailbox with Ted and Elaine, arms crossed. "We're witnessing history," Ted said quietly. "No," I corrected him, my voice like steel. "We're witnessing justice." And it wasn't just Karen and Doug. Other board members, those who had looked the other way, signed off on fake fines and helped cover up violations, were dragged into the scandal. Some lawyered up, some fled town. Some turned state's witness faster than you could blink. The entire structure they had built, their little kingdom of greed, fear, and fake authority, collapsed like a rotted house of cards. And the residents? They weren't victims anymore. They were rebuilding, together. Within a week, the temporary HOA committee rewrote the bylaws, stripping away Karen's authoritarian clauses. Residents volunteered for maintenance work, restored damaged gardens, and even held a free barbecue in the park, something Karen's HOA had once fined a family $500 for attempting. Mom came home from the hospital during all of this, still weak, but smiling. Neighbors lined the street, holding signs that read, "Welcome home, Margaret," and "Our real neighborhood hero." As we wheeled her up the driveway, Mom whispered, "I can't believe it. After all that, they didn't forget me." "No," I said, voice thick. "We remember, and we're never letting it happen again. Not here. Not ever." Because now Pinecrest Gardens wasn't Karen's neighborhood anymore. It was ours. The morning after Karen and Doug's arrest, the sun rose differently over Pinecrest Gardens. There was no more cautious peeking through blinds, no whispered complaints behind closed doors. People were stepping out onto their porches again, talking, laughing. For the first time in years, the neighborhood felt like a community, not a prison. Ted called an emergency town hall meeting at the old community center. It wasn't fancy, just rows of folding chairs and a worn-out podium, but it buzzed with more life and hope than any HOA gathering Karen had ever staged. Elaine stood at the front, holding a thick folder of proposals. "We're not just here to clean up the mess," she said, voice ringing clear. "We're here to build something better." The first order of business? A complete overhaul of the HOA. Every abusive rule Karen had snuck into the bylaws, gone. Fines that had once threatened to bankrupt residents for small infractions like a mailbox color or a misplaced gnome, wiped clean. Mandatory inspections, daily harassment, the secret anonymous tip hotline Karen had set up, all abolished by unanimous vote. Instead, the residents voted to create a neighborhood stewardship council, 100% volunteer, no mandatory dues. No weaponized fines, no power games. Instead of punishing people, the council would support them, helping seniors with yard work, organizing community events, making sure no one was left isolated or vulnerable. As Ted said, smiling at Mom in the front row, "We're neighbors, not enemies, not slow." And the most emotional moment of the night, when little Timmy Rodriguez, barely 9 years old, stood up, clutching a homemade poster. On it, he'd drawn a big, colorful creek surrounded by sunflowers and smiling stick figure families. "I don't want anybody to get sick anymore," he said shyly into the microphone. "Can we make sure the water is always safe and happy?" There wasn't a dry eye in the room. The council voted right then and there to create a water safety task force with full community oversight so no one could ever poison the very life of the neighborhood again. The rebuilding began immediately. Neighbors who had once only exchanged cold nods now rolled up their sleeves together, replanting flower beds, repainting fences, restoring battered lawns. Mr. Jenkins, who used to keep to himself, built a brand new community bulletin board by hand, Mrs. Gonzalez organized Saturday farmers markets in the park. Ted started weekend cookouts, no permits, no fines, just grills, laughter, and folding tables full of potluck dishes. And me? I quietly transferred ownership of the water company, Clearwater LLC, to a newly formed community water trust. No more private control. No more manipulation. Water, like trust, would flow freely again. Mom, fragile but recovering, came to the first farmer's market in her wheelchair, bundled in a sweater. Neighbors gathered around, handing her homemade bread, garden flowers, and hand-drawn cards. "You saved this neighborhood," Elaine whispered as she hugged Mom. Mom just smiled faintly and said, "We saved each other." By the time autumn rolled around, the healing garden dedicated to Mom was blooming. Rows of roses, daisies, and bright marigolds lined the new walking paths. Every single gnome we'd lost, and many more new ones, stood proudly along the garden trail, each representing a memory, a family, a survivor. And at the center stood a simple plaque, in honor of those who chose hope over fear, truth over silence, and neighbors over enemies. Pinecrest Gardens had once been a battlefield. Now it was home again. Not because of bylaws or boards, not because of fines or fear, but because ordinary people chose to stand together against poison, against power, for love, for family, for each other. The seasons turned slowly after the battle was over. Pinecrest Gardens wasn't perfect. No place ever is. But it was ours again. And more importantly, we remembered how to look out for each other. Karen and Doug's trial dragged on for months, and every time new details came out about the threats, the poisoned water, the years of manipulation, it shook us all. Yet strangely, there wasn't a thirst for revenge among the neighbors. There was something deeper, a hunger for healing. When the verdict finally came, guilty on all counts, the neighborhood didn't celebrate with banners or parties. We simply held a quiet candlelight vigil in the healing garden, each family bringing a single flower to lay by the fountain. Mom, frail but smiling, placed the last flower herself. "Justice isn't about punishing the past," she whispered. "It's about protecting the future." When Karen and Doug were led away, they barely looked at anyone. And maybe that was punishment enough. Over time, the scars faded. The smashed mailboxes were replaced. The poisoned water systems were rebuilt. The violation notices once taped to our doors were now replaced by hand-drawn flyers inviting families to barbecues, creek cleanups, or game nights. The money collected from lawsuits and donations wasn't wasted on lawsuits or petty fights. Instead, it built a scholarship fund for neighborhood kids. It paid for medical bills for those Karen had hurt. It funded annual safety inspections for our water system. And the healing garden grew wilder and brighter every year. One crisp spring afternoon, I pushed Mom's wheelchair along the creek, now running clean and clear. "You did it," she said, gazing at the little wooden bridge the kids had built downstream. "You fought for this place, and for all of us." I shook my head, smiling. "We all fought, Mom." She squeezed my hand. "That's how real change happens. Not from fighting alone, but from standing together." As we sat by the creek, I pulled out a small package. Inside was a brand new garden gnome, painted bright blue, with a tiny watering can in one hand and a brave little smile on his face. "What's his name?" Mom asked, her eyes twinkling. I thought for a moment, feeling the cool breeze off the water and the hum of life around us. "Hope," I said. Mom laughed softly, her voice still a little weak, but full of something stronger than any HOA, any threat, any darkness. Faith. Faith in the goodness of people. Faith in the strength of a community that had refused to be broken. Faith that even the worst poison could be washed away, with truth, with courage, and with forgiveness. As the sun set behind the trees, lighting the creek in gold, I realized we hadn't just saved a neighborhood, we'd saved each other. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do, the thing that Karens of the world never understand, is not to destroy what you hate. It's to build something so beautiful, so true, that it leaves no room for hate to survive at all. That's the real victory. That's the real future, and it's only just beginning. No matter how powerful or cruel someone seems, the truth has a way of rising, just like water finds its way back to the river. In life, real victory isn't about revenge. It's about standing together, healing wounds, and rebuilding something stronger than before. Protect what matters. Fight for your community. And never forget, sometimes the strongest weapon isn't anger, it's hope.